Colombia, the only South American country with access to both the Atlantic and Pacific Ocean, is well known for its parasitic vistas, warm people, and rich culture. Unfortunately, Colombia is also well known for its long history of political armed conflict, violence, and at the same time being the #1 producer of recreational drugs in the world. Narco-traffic has been fully embedded in Colombia's painful history. However, it is important to understand that drugs in Colombian soil have been a commonality for centuries. The Arhuacos, an indigenous tribe in the Colombian coast and very savvy in agricultural procedures, cultivated and consumed marijuana regularly. This started in the Colombian coast, specifically a beautiful region called Sierra Nevada, which is habited by an indigenous group called the Arhuacos. These natives were experts in growing marijuana.
The production caught the eye of local dealers who started international transactions, making Colombia the epicenter of drug production and trafficking. And Colombia, a country where political divisions brought violence and discontent, had the perfect ambience to foster an illegal yet very powerful empire.
The growth of the drug empire was not dealt with by the Colombian government during the 1970s and 80s. Aside from traffickers in the United States, Colombians have earned more from the drug trade than any other nationality of the Western Hemisphere. During the 1980s, 70 to 80% of the refined cocaine and 50 to 60% of the marijuana available in the United States market have come from Colombia. Drugs are a horrendous scourge that has hurt our country, Colombia, as all of a sudden we became the largest producers of cocaine in the world. Elite Colombian society and government were tolerant of narco-traffickers, faced with constant accusations against Colombian officials and politicians, and facing international pressure. The next Colombian president, Julio César Turbay, had no choice but to make weak moves such as capturing growers and mules without touching drug lords. Historians also mention that the drug empire became closely involved with political campaigns and government elections, and illicit wealth showed throughout the country in extravagant ways, such as fancy palaces as the narcos' new home, or extravagant displays such as foreign cars and having exotic animals in their farms. Meanwhile, the export of cocaine continued to consolidate, and narco-traffickers from Medellin or Cali remained strong, untouchable, and much appreciated by crowds of Colombians who until now had been destitute and unheard by their government. Furthermore, the drug empire became involved in financing the already existent political armed conflict of Colombia, further destabilizing the country. But Colombian tolerance of drug trafficking reached its limit when drug lords became responsible for the assassination of Justice Minister Rodrigo Lara Bonilla in 1984. Mr. Lara Bonilla had openly denounced narco-traffickers' illegal enterprises and the damage done to younger drug consumers. His assassination was the beginning of a very bloody and painful time for Colombia, surrounded by growing pressure from the United States against criminal networks that were de-establishing the country and smuggling drugs into a growing American market. We will be fighting with all it takes to end drug trafficking. With Minister Lara's death, the United States pressures Colombia to execute and reinforce extradition treaty, which skyrockets terrorist attacks in Colombian soil.
And the anarchy began. The drug lords of the Medellin and Cali cartel used murder, intimidation, and assassination to keep journalists and public officials from speaking out against them. Law enforcement officers and judges were favored targets of these unscrupulous drug cartels that controlled entire towns and economies to support their criminal business.
The 80s were a time of terror because at every moment Colombians could get killed with bombs or other attacks, especially in the big cities such as Bogotá or Medellin. By 1985, Colombia had the highest murder rate in the world. The Medellin cartel was fast becoming the richest and most feared underworld crime organization the world had ever encountered. Moreover, the drug cartels delivered to the United States a large dose of the violence and terror that their drug trafficking activities had inflicted on their home country in places such as Florida. In simple terms, extradition is the legal process by which one country hands over a fugitive to another country where that person has been accused or convicted of a crime. The extradition treaty empowered Colombia to enhance borderless justice by extraditing the trafficker to the United States, even if the suspect had never left Colombia.
Extradition has always been a powerful tool to stabilize the government and foster justice. As powerful as they were, the Colombian traffickers, who managed much of the world's cocaine business, have made no secret they fear one thing: extradition to the United States.
My brother Pablo Escobar never wanted any Colombian to be extradited.
They have always regarded the U.S. justice system as less susceptible to their threats and bribes than judges, politicians, and prison wardens in Colombia. In January of 1988, Jorge Luis Ochoa, a leader of the Medellin cocaine cartel, walked out of a maximum security prison and disappeared. To top it off, Pablo Escobar negotiated to build a high-security prison to fulfill his sentences and walked out of it without effort.
By contrast, the few Colombian traffickers who were extradited received lengthy prison terms. As expected, Colombia's drug kingpins fought for abolition of the extradition treaty. They murdered those who spoke out in favor of it, bribed officials to favor its termination, paid publicly to portray the treaty as a violation of national sovereignty, and filed several dozen legal challenges.
The Extraditables was an organization created by Colombian drug lords in the early 1980s. Their motto was, "We prefer a grave in Colombia to a prison in the United States." The aim of the group was to intimidate the Colombian government into banning extradition at the constitutional level and manipulate Colombian society into supporting their goal. This group's actions escalated into a war between the state and the drug cartel, with violent acts committed against politicians and members of law enforcement.
The government said my brother was the guilty one to cover the corruption, but it was not entirely true.
Members were largely drawn from the Medellin cartel and other linked to the drug trafficking racket. Its principal leaders, among others, were Pablo Escobar Gaviria, who was killed in 1993 on the roof of a house in Medellin, Gonzalo Rodriguez, who was killed by a Colombian military personnel in 1989, and Fabio Ochoa Vasquez, sentenced to 30 years in federal prison in the United States.
After the destruction of the Cali and Medellin cartels, the cocaine business began to fragment. Younger leaders realized that the large organizations had been far more vulnerable to attack by American and Colombian authorities. They formed smaller, more controllable groups and began compartmentalizing their responsibility.
But the United States and Colombia never stopped trying, and once more, both countries joined efforts again to put into place the Counter-Narcotics Offense Plan Colombia, a comprehensive borderless strategy to seek justice and healing.
In my opinion, extradition was a powerful ammunition against narco traffic. To date, Colombia has extradited more than 200 criminals to the United States who have been the leaders of the drug lord. The narco traffic problem is definitely far from over, as there are more than 300 active drug smuggling organizations in Colombia, and cocaine is shipped to every industrialized nation in the world. Unfortunately, the Colombian population remains stigmatized worldwide due to drugs. We have not recovered from being stigmatized as a country, therefore Colombians are viewed as drug traffickers throughout the world.
However, the borderless efforts made both countries, such as using extradition to bring justice and stabilize the government, or the establishment of the Plan Colombia to provide strategic training and promote social change, have made a difference.
Colombia has never stopped to fight against narco traffic, and the large majority of our population despises it and wants to end it.
In spite of endless violence and continuous criminal cohesion, the Colombian economy has grown, and the country's political stability remains strong. The United States continues to be Colombia's best ally in the never-ending war against drugs.